Continuing on from an earlier video I made on the subject of deconstructing the self, or in particular what this means to me, the idea of deconstructing myself. An open question for me is, what, in doing this, do I want others who either know me or have known me in the past to make of this so-called new person that they discover? And the truth is, I don't know, and it probably will vary from person to person, situation to situation, and indeed my own state of mind, my own mood and needs and desires at a particular time. But what I do know is that by expressing my dual nature, as it were, that I will not so easily be able to pretend, to hide behind the mask that I've worn in my male self, that self-image that I've created and curated as a part of my narrative. This is really what's being deconstructed, or at least shown as not being the full story about who I am. So, for example, if I wanted to present myself, as I sometimes do, as someone to be taken seriously, as a wise elder, let's say, as a teacher, as someone to be held in esteem and regard, and I believed, or often have believed, that the way I dress and present myself, the way I speak, all plays a part in creating that illusion. Now, if someone sees a picture of me as a showgirl, it's going to be difficult to just rely on that mask, as it were, as a way of wanting them to take me seriously. Of course, what I hope for is that some people at least will see behind the mask, and actually what they will take seriously is what I'm talking about, how I'm behaving, the things I have to say, tuning in to my presence, really detecting something of the authentic me and my personality, or personalities, shall we say. In a sense, presenting myself in this way, being very open and throwing away the mask, as it were, is a little bit like almost the opposite. I imagine, for example, a monk, one of those monks, Franciscan or whatever, they typically wear this huge cloak, I guess to keep warm in the cold cloisters of old, with a hood that essentially veils their face. They're almost faceless people. And being kind of invisible, being kind of not reliant on a single mask or a way of presenting, is in a way quite similar, I think, to this see me in all these different guises, see me playing masculine and feminine. It's not quite the same, but I think there's something aligned there with that idea. But rather than hiding behind a mask, I'm actually throwing it away, letting my true self, my authentic self, be known. And really not relying on external appearances as a way of for people to get to know me. Now, another thought that comes to me when thinking about this deconstruction project, as it were, that I am embarked upon by becoming more open about my multiple selves, as it were, is whether I am at risk, or indeed am, prostituting myself in some way. And by this I mean the idea of cheapening myself, perhaps to achieve some temporary pleasure or satisfaction, letting down some of the defenses, some of the oops, we have a dog arriving, some of the ideas around what it means to be dignified and to sort of hold your head high in the world, in society. And I suppose the question there really is what presenting as Anja particularly and perhaps presenting in playful guises might represent for some people. There will be those for sure who think that we should behave, we human beings should behave and conform to certain expectations of dress and presentation and so on. Perhaps some of those might be motivated by strong religious ideas. They certainly don't fit with my own spirituality, which is quite deep, actually, as I think may be apparent if you've listened to several other of my blogs on this channel. But certainly there will be those that have that view. But I think the only other real reason why people might see that it's undignified for someone like me to present in this way is kind of if they don't believe guys should dress and be playful, and particularly presenting as women. Now, again, of course, there are those who hold that view. In the minority generally, but some will have a very strong view. I don't, and I think to have that view, in a sense, you kind of assume, perhaps, if you're not taking this kind of religious stance or the belief that men should be men, women should be women, and stick within those binaries, that presenting this way actually is in some way humiliating. Now, for me, that then would say, well, is it humiliating to dress, for anybody to dress in a feminine way and to be playful? I can't possibly see that it can be, because that would be denigrating, I believe, actually, towards women particularly. So I don't know quite where to go with this question of am I prostituting myself, but it doesn't feel to me that I am. If I were, I would be very aware of that, I think, and that would be quite a strong moral compass, a guide that was pointing me away from doing this. Of course, there will be some people who aren't ready to meet, as it were, the authentic me. For them, I may variously appear as a fool, as a freak, a pervert, or for others I might be seen as being brave, stupid, or having a very disjointed personality. Whatever, for all, I am disclosing something more about myself. And for them, as it were, to take it or leave it. And I think disclosure in itself is very liberating, or can be. It doesn't mean that I'm giving up on everything that I've built up as part of my ego narrative, and all of the creations, as it were, then cease to be important. These obviously serve a purpose in different situations. They help us navigate our lives. They enable us to be tested, to be challenged, and to explore the rich sensory experiences of life as well. But I think the key is not to be misled by the ego into delusion about yourself, in this case, about how you identify. And of course there will be circumstances where presenting in a conventional and expected way is going to be important. So, for example, I wouldn't turn up at a funeral wearing a flower dress or something like that. It just wouldn't be showing respect in that particular social context. Having said that, I do love the style of someone like Grayson Perry, who is able to do that unashamedly, not going to funerals necessarily, but turning up at formal events perhaps, and not being afraid, being very secure in their sexuality and how they're presenting. In presenting myself in both Anja and Clive modes, it is at least a statement, I guess, that I'm ready to be non-conventional, to live on the edge, to be judged as different, possibly even ostracized a little because of that. And for me, that trumps, that freedom to do that, and that need to do that trumps needing to conform. Of course, it's allowing me to be more of my true self. I'm definitely stating more of who I am, and that's not someone who wants to be boxed, even by my closest friends. Maybe some can come to see me as someone who is more interesting and broader in character than whatever it is they've hooked onto in their relationship with me. Some won't cope or be confused, but I hope and believe that many will. And that's been my experience so far with those I've opened up to. It may be too that some even recognize something of how they play the gender game, how they create an illusion based on their own narratives, their own stories they tell, and how the mask they wear and how they present themselves. And come to appreciate that, as it were, gender wholeness, integrating masculine and feminine perhaps, can equate to spiritual wholeness, at least for some, like me. So what of the people I've known in the past, and indeed know now, but thinking of perhaps teachers and work colleagues and bosses and more that I have encountered in earlier life, what might they make of this new person were they to stumble upon this channel? I think that of my friends that I know now, just a handful, probably just 2 or 3 that I can immediately think of, would be at best shocked and perhaps distance themselves a little, be a little bit more wary, uncertain. It could have some effect on the quality, the strength of our relationship. I suspect they wouldn't completely disown me, although in one case I think it's a possibility, knowing this individual has very strong anti-trans views, and we've debated that a number of times, and I don't think that position is going to shift anytime soon. Of those I've known in the past, work colleagues and so on, people in the past that I wanted to be seen as taken seriously by, and obviously to conform, being in the office environment and different social context I was in, I think again that there are probably only 1 or 2. I can think of one very homophobic boss who, I don't know if he was transphobic as well, but it would not at all surprise me. And that was when I was working at a time when it seemingly was acceptable for some pretty nasty homophobic talk to go on and during in the office, and the sort of macho culture that existed at that time. I'm sure it still does in some environments. So I think that could have been a difficult encounter where I open at that time, had I been open at that time. In terms of them finding out now, I do not particularly care because I have no contact with them and have no particular need for regular contact, a dependency as it were on them. They can make what they like, what they find. I think I would have definitely really wanted to be more open back in my university days. This was all very, very suppressed then, very hidden. And I think if I could have been more open, it would have been accepted probably by my tutors and teachers, probably most of my fellow students, and possibly it might even have allowed 1 or 2 of them to accept me. So I think on balance, with the people I've known and the people I know now, there are far more advantages, as it were, in being open than not. As I mentioned before, there are some that I've deliberately not come out to simply because it just hasn't been the right time, it hasn't been relevant, and in 1 or 2 cases it could cause confusion, particularly for older relatives. I now have much more confidence than I ever did in the past, which perhaps allows me to say this and to feel this now. And if anything, my readiness to disclose myself now, perhaps because I'm free of the worries of what work colleagues and bosses and so on might think, just leaves me with a bit of regret that I couldn't, or rather, perhaps I should say, wasn't ready to do this much earlier.